Hey everyone, Austin here with Carlson Cards, and welcome to episode 13 of the Carlson Cards podcast. We have a solo episode today because there's so much to talk about from my experience with my first national convention. So I want to talk through that a little bit today. Kind of dive into and almost make, let's say, like a time capsule here. So, if I look at this a year from now, I kind of want to get off my chest what my immediate first reactions are to the show, some of the things I learned, and a lot of what we'll talk about today is the cards I picked up and how it happened. So again, if you love cards, if you love collecting, this should be a really fun episode, and I hope you guys enjoy. I'm going to use some aids here if you're watching on YouTube, kind of like a PowerPoint presentation, just so I remember to hit on all the points. So before we dive into the show itself, I do want to talk about the weeks leading up to the show because I think there's some things I did really well that really affected my show experience and made it a lot better because of it. So first of all, some of the things I did that again, I just want to talk through here. I was very specific in narrowing down a list of specific sets and players and cards that I was looking for. Now, I'll highlight a lot of these because many of the pickups I made, actually, I think all of them were in my list. So when you get to this show, and again, I'll talk about what my experience was when I walked in, but it is so freaking overwhelming. Everyone will say that, but you can't prepare yourself. I got in there, right? Every single table has different things. Because I had boundaries set, it made it so much easier to kind of understand which tables I can maybe run right past, which ones to spend some time at. And then when it comes down to making this list, one thing that I did that I think was very important was that I started sharing my list a few weeks ago. So again, as we dive in, we talk about the stories here. You're going to hear a lot of names of folks that helped me find cards. That would not have happened if I didn't make people aware of what I was looking for. And finally, again, that kind of came from because I had already in place reciprocal relationships with other collectors. Again, whether that's through the podcast here on Instagram, chatting with people, or meeting them at other shows, I'd helped a lot of people find cards and they had helped me find cards. So it's kind of that relationship already set in stone where we trusted each other and we knew what each other was looking for. And again, many of the collectors that helped me at this show I had already known for a while. So this is a big tip I think I want to share. Again, if we look back and listen to this next year, it's important to spend the whole rest of the year really meeting people and getting to know other collectors because that's how you're going to find a lot of the cards. At least that's the way I found it to happen at this show. Another thing that I did that again was very critical, and I'll give Jordan a huge credit for this, determine what cards to bring and be very specific about them. So I brought about 20 cards to the show to trade. They were a mix of Hall of Fame players, typically very short printed sets. So you're talking, Topps finest serial numbered, gold refractors, 90s high grade baseball, miscellaneous stuff. Again, we're going to touch through because a lot of these I did use in trade. So it's very, very important that I not only set aside what cards I want to bring, number one. Number two, I brought cards that I didn't even want to let go of, but I knew I should bring with just in case they were needed to get other cards or to be able to sell to get cash if I spent all my cash, which did happen. And then the final thing was that I did a great job pricing mine on the back. There's multiple times that I'll talk about again as we get going here where there were trades that happened or other people, bought cards from me. I was very on point with what my cards were worth, and it made it a lot easier because they trust you right away. They're not trying to comp your stuff while there's a line of 50 people, that sort of thing. So again, that was a big deal I did. And I have a bullet point here that I'm looking at. Jordan tips were absolutely spot on with everything above. I will say that and emphasize it again. So Northwoods Card Collector and his buddy Andrew, who we talked about on the podcast, Cards and Sneaks on Instagram. I mean, they absolutely are like totally a total different level than myself at these shows, man. I mean, the tips they gave and when I ran into them at the show, they were so methodical going through this thing. And again, I feel like that episode was so helpful. And again, huge shout out to them. Appreciate the tips that Jordan gave on here, and then Andrew, was giving me on the side because they really, really hit home. So when it comes to cards for trade, I did want to highlight one quick thing that I did prior to the show that actually ended up working out really well. So there's a guy by the name of at Apocalypse Cards on Instagram. Some of you may know him. He had ran a story sale maybe 2 weeks before the national. I'm not sure maybe if he was funding a big purchase or something, but a lot of his stuff was priced extremely reasonable. Like I'm talking like 70 to 80% of what all the prior sales were. And so I actually worked with him, picked up 3 cards that I'm going to mention here because they'll come up in other stories. One of which was a Mark McGwire, Bowman's Best, Superfractor. I think this is out of 2020 or 2021. I can't remember the year off the top of my head. We also picked up a Vlad Guerrero Jr., Bowman's Best Atomic Refractor from 1998 and a BGS 95 Pop 1. And then I did pick up an Ozzie Smith 1980 Topps PSA 10. So you're probably thinking, looking at this, Austin collects football. Why is he buying baseball? Something I've done in the past that I've really enjoyed doing is picking up cards that I know nothing about with the intention to, trade, or if I set up at a show to sell, that sort of thing. Because if you're going to learn about a sport or a set, I feel like you can't just jump in and just buy all the cards for yourself. I feel like you got to handle them a little bit, get to know the players a little better, the sets, that sort of thing. So when I saw this story sale, not only financially did it make sense, again, if I could bring these and trade for higher value, obviously that makes sense. But in addition, I was able to learn a little bit about these players in sports and understand now that again, understand that baseball for some reason was just really hot and really good in trades at this show. So again, shout out to Apocalypse Cards, really fun deal with him. And all three of the cards I just mentioned are no longer in my possession. So they were used to get some very big cards for myself. All right, so now we're going to set the stage. So it's Wednesday morning. I am planning to go to the show at this point from Wednesday around, I think, get there around 1 to get the VIP badge and then leave around Saturday. So I'm staying with my dad and my brother. They were coming with. So first mistake I made when I left for this show, and maybe you guys will find this funny. The last time I went to Chicago, I forgot an iPass for the tolls. So I had to set my Google Maps to no tolls. Now, what I didn't realize was that it was still set to no tolls. So halfway through my drive, I'm sitting there thinking, this is taking way longer and this route does not look correct. Didn't occur to me till we were on our way home by Friday. But anyways, that's what happened on the way out. And the reason this is funny and kind of important is because there was a Peyton auction that was ending, and it was expected to end about 5 minutes after I arrived at the hotel. So I'll touch on this a little bit. So again, one of the cards that I was really looking for at this show was a 1998 Bowman's Best Atomic Refractor for Peyton Manning, either the base or the best performers insert. So the base is out of 100. The best performers insert is out of 50. Both rookie cards, both just, gorgeous looking set. And what happened basically was one of these popped up for auction Wednesday morning of the National, like very big card. I don't really understand why someone would auction on this time. And if you're aware, again, if you talk to people from the show, there's a lot of flight issues. So a lot of people were stuck in the air or they were jumping on two flights when it should have been direct. So I think again that just shows to show how crazy this was to auction this on a morning before the national convention. I mean, there's so many people who probably would have bid on this and didn't. So more of the story, again, I'm driving, my my added 45 minutes to my drive because of that mistake with Google Maps. And I arrive and quick, I'm in the parking lot. I have 2 minutes to spare at the auction. I quick double check what I want to bid, toss a bid in, and I win this probably for, I think I put like no, not 1,000, maybe $300 or $400 higher. And I won it for less than that, right? So I would have bid up to $300 or $400 higher than what it ended at. So it's crazy to think that again, this national week, a card that was on my list towards the top popped up and I was ready for it, everything. And I think that's a key note here is like, I was surprised how much you have to come to play to this thing, not only online, but just in general, how many cards will fly at you very quick. So I'm glad I pulled the trigger on this one. It kind of set the stage for the national where it sounds silly, but I was already happy with what I had, right? If I had just went to the show, met some people and gotten this card, I probably would have been pretty content. But at this point, this became a consolation prize, which is crazy once you see what I was able to pick up and kind of stumbled through and ended up with. So I just want to throw a note out there about this one and kind of something that I learned is that don't forget to check the eBay, even though you're on, a trip to go to the national. Don't forget to check eBay. You never know what's going to pop up or maybe what you had on your watch list that you maybe forget about while you're driving, that sort of thing. So really awesome and pumped to add this one to the collection. So prior to the show, again, I mentioned this, it's got crazy really quick. So my dad and brother had flight issues. So we were kind of deciding, do I wait at the hotel and then wait for them to get there? Or do I just go up to the venue, get the VIP badge and wait for them there and they can Uber from the hotel to there? Thankfully, I went with that decision. So I got there around 1 o'clock, got the VIP badge, and then got lunch with a collector, a friend from Michigan, Kelvin B Cards on Instagram. And then, kind of mentally was preparing. I brought all my cards. I brought all my money. I was ready to head up to the show to get there, a half hour early or whatever before it opens. And as I was walking actually to the show, is where it started to get crazy. And I realized like we're at the freaking national. So I'm in a group chat with Peyton Manning collectors. And one of the big collectors in our chat, the Captain 37 on Instagram, he sent a message that there was somebody walking around the show with a 2012 Prism Gold Peyton Manning. So out of 10, first year Prism, a card that was not even on my list because I did not expect to find one of these at a reasonable price. So I will talk a little bit about values here. I don't typically, when I talk about cards or on this podcast that much, but I think it's important to understand what was going on here. So Kevin had said that the guy was asking $7,000. All the prior sales were like, 8,600. There's one a little higher that was a true gem for like 12,000 right prior. And before last December, I actually don't think there had been a sale of this card since like 2014, if I remember right. So anyways, when I saw that message and Kevin said that, and he basically implied like, hey, if somebody wants it, I will grab it for you and pay for it. And then, you just pay me right when you get in the show. It took me a second. That was the mistake. So this is the first example where I lacked, I would say, the killer instinct. Like, again, you see a card that there's only 10 copies of. I know where, let's say, three or four other ones are. There's not a real good chance that I'll find another one of these anytime soon. And I took 5 minutes to respond because I want to think it through and talk it through with somebody. And the reason is because at 7,000, again, that price point that he was asking, that was just about what I had brought to the show. And the problem was I had deals lined up already to buy other cards. So if I made this happen, I would be strapped for cash, either have to run to an ATM or probably the bank realistically, or try to sell some of the cards I brought, which I wasn't looking to do right away at the show. I wanted to walk around first. So about 5 minutes later, I messaged Kevin and just said, hey, will he take trades? Is he, negotiable? And he basically said, no, the guy's very firm at 7. The case is chipped. That's why he's asking a little lower. And what he said was that already a bunch of people reached out. So if I wanted, I have to tell him. So I basically typed out a text that says something along the lines of, you know what, screw it, I'll take it, grab it, I'll be there in a second. And by the time, he didn't answer, so I gave him a call right away, and he said, I'll go grab it. But keep in mind, the guy might have sold it. So I was like, oh, crap, you're right, right? He had spent 5 minutes. Maybe the guy got to walk around a little more and sell it to another dealer. And again, this was all prior to the show. This was during dealer setup. So he calls back and says, yeah, man, unfortunately, he did sell that. So that was the first kind of heartbreak and kind of, again, my experience of like, dude, you should have just pulled the trigger. But again, sometimes you have to think things through. And my thought was, okay, I always try to say in life, it wasn't meant to be. For whatever reason, it wasn't meant to be. And it's fine. I don't have to worry about cash and try to figure it out after I spent all of it before the show even started. So that was there. We'll come back to this card because it is an important part of my national story, but that's what happened prior to the show. Now we're going to step into basically, I got there. I have the VIP badge. We are outside the doors for the VIP early entry. It is packed. Like we're talking again, thousands upon thousands of people, like just packed. One thing I learned very quickly when you got into the show, too, if you think you're somebody in this hobby, you get to this show and realize you are nobody. This hobby is way bigger than you think. Not that I think I'm some hotshot or something, right? But you have this group of people that you chat with online. You assume you got like kind of a big group of people you're friends with, whatever, and then you get there and it's like, oh, wait, there's actually 100,000 people I've never ever chatted with that are all here. This is insane. Like there's so much more in this hobby than I could ever imagine. So that when the doors open, right, I had not thought through well enough what to do. I'm going to be honest. So we came in on the side where it's all of the corporate tables essentially. And so when we opened the door, it was all corporate tables, a ton of vintage. I immediately like, oh crap, that's what everyone said the National is. Like, I don't know what to do here. I'm not seeing anything I like. So I shot towards the back of the venue because, again, prior to the show, another thing that happened was two different people. I can't remember the second person, but one of which was Gunther's Cards had messaged me to let me know that there was some 2013 select golds in a showcase. And if you're not aware, I'm working on that set for the base set, 100 cards, and the legend set, 50 cards. That's the first year of select for football. They're numbered out of 10. They look gorgeous. They're all over my Instagram page if you want to take a look. But anyways, I knew there was two at the show. I was given a table number and I tried to go find them. So again, I shot back to the back of the venue once I saw that there wasn't really anything up front that piqued my interest. And I spent about 25 minutes of the beginning of the national convention trying to find this table that had these two cards, which were a Michael Irvin PSA 9 gold and a Steve Young PSA 10, both of which cards I have not seen yet as I've been looking for this set. So I do finally stumble upon the table, and right away the dealer's gone. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I just wasted 30 minutes. This guy's not even here who can negotiate a deal with me because the prices, again, were very, very high. And I wanted to wait for the dealer because I wasn't going to pay what they had been asking. And so right away, the doubt, this is where the doubts start creeping in. Man, I've been to a lot of shows, but they're a lot smaller. Like maybe this big show thing isn't for me. Cause again, another half hour crept by. I just wasn't seeing anything, wasn't finding anything. It felt like a madhouse in there already. But then something awesome happened. So again, I mentioned Cards and Sneaks on Instagram. He was probably my biggest assister at this show because he sent me a text that he found a few different from the 1999 finest gold refractors. And I was kind of looking for that set. I really do like it. I look for Hall of Famers typically. And he mentioned there's a Jerry Rice. So I quick shot over, found him, did find the Jerry Rice gems. Is that already at a price that I had recently bought one at? And then I was able to negotiate cheaper, which was great. Then he did also find me both Charles Woodsons in the set from the same dealer. Now, these were PSA 7s, but they had the peel on them, as did the Jerry Rice. I actually prefer them without peel. So the grade wasn't a big deal to me on this one, knowing I could pick it up. Maybe crack it at some point in the future and peel off. I am team no peel, but I fully understand if you do enjoy the peel, it's just not for me. So it's great. Now I had broken the ice. I picked up 3 cards that were on my hit list on the sets that I was looking for, and I kind of felt a little better already. Like, again, I didn't really expect or know what to find here. So the fact that I could leave with already 3 cards in the first day that were big for my collection, that was very important to me and an awesome way to break the ice. So then meanwhile, I get back to the table where we have again that Steve Young, Michael Irvin Select Gold. I finally caught the dealer that was supposed to be there. And, I worked out a nice trade with them, surprisingly. So my one takeaway, and you're going to, hear this a lot through this episode, trading was a big deal at this show for me. Now, I was surprised because I really expected having cash would be more helpful, but the cards actually felt more powerful, which is a little interesting. It felt like I was easier to get deals done offering cards in trade versus trying to negotiate them down. Because a lot of these cards that I was finding outside of, again, those 99 finest golds, those are pretty fairly priced. But the select golds out of 2013 that I was looking for, typically what I was seeing was that they were stickered at probably 2 times what they would, go for if they went to auction. So it's really tricky because I don't want to offer 50% and offend the dealer, but really I can't pay what they're asking on a lot of these, and that was kind of the dilemma here. But when I introduced trading, it made it a lot easier. So I got back to them. I basically showed the dealers my first time trying to trade here. I offered him my box I had that, again, all the cards were priced. They were all Hall of Fame, rare sets. And he picked out 2 cards. He picked out a 2013 Prism Blue Tom Brady PSA 10, and then picked out a Ken Griffey Jr. Gold X Fractor out of 2003 Finest, which again surprised me because I only brought 4 baseball cards and already one was being pulled out, which was an interesting find on my end. Both of these, which I had just recently graded, again, you buy raw for much lower than that, and now you're getting significantly higher value for the cards in trade because that's what they go for in a high grade, because these are sets that are fairly difficult to gem or even get nines on. So they will make a nice trade. I picked up the Steve Young there, the Michael Irvin. Again, I couldn't get up to his asking price, but we got the trade value down on his cards, and then again, mine were pretty set in stone. It's pretty clear what they were worth. So able to make a nice trade, add a little bit of cash, and went away with 2 nice Hall of Famers for my set. So now I was really feeling good. We had broken the ice. I have already 5 cards that I did not expect to even maybe see at the show that are going into my collection. And it was great. I hadn't given up a lot of cash at that point. The 99 finest golds are pretty reasonable. And again, the other one was mostly trade. So I get a text from a guy that I'm friends with from Wisconsin. His name's Shong. He goes by at ShowBusyLiving on Instagram. And he sent me a picture. He had spotted a Bart Starr out of that 2013 Select Gold set. And again, at this point, I'm thinking we're only a couple hours in. This is madness right now. Like, everyone's spotting these cards for me, doing a horrible job of finding them myself, but so be it. And basically, I get over to the showcase, and what I see kind of blew my mind. So I see the Bart Star, and then right below it is that Peyton Manning, that 2012 Prism Gold we had just talked about a second ago that I missed out on. So what was awesome about it was that the Peyton was only stickered at 8,000. So again, I know the dealer had to have bought it for 7 because again, the guy was not negotiable on that price that he had got it for. And I was pumped because honestly, I felt like whatever dealer got this was probably going to sticker it at, way above what they go for. And I was going to have no shot at this card because I just can't give up that amount of value or money at this point, because I've had some luck finding other cards already. Really don't want to waste it all on one card. And turns out the great part was this dealer was actually from Wisconsin, a guy I've sort of met. His name's Chase. He goes by at CRV_cards on Instagram. And actually, Grant, who had on the podcast right before the National, is really good friends with him. So it's kind of cool. You get that network going. Chase and I had never really chatted or ever really made a deal together. But it was nice knowing you kind of had some mutual friends where you start immediately trusting each other, if that kind of makes sense. I'm sure you guys have all been there where you have those dealers or those other people in the hobby where you have mutual friends, and it kind of helps break the ice a little bit. So what I immediately did was just, again, point out the Star, point out the Peyton, and said, hey, I'm really interested in those two. Do you have any interest in maybe trading for at least some of this? I know you probably want to get some cash out of the Peyton, but if you want to trade for some, I have some nice cards here that I can maybe offer. So then Chase pulled out 3 cards, which I was pretty excited about. Again, I had just mentioned how much cash approximately I had bought, and I already owed someone money for other cards that I lined up. So to be able to trade a little bit here was a big deal, and I knew that going in. So he did pick out the Ozzie Smith that I talked about having grabbed on Instagram the week prior. He picked out the Vlad Guerrero Atomic Refractor. Again, had just picked up the week prior. So it was really sweet seeing that these cards that I had, again, added to use as trade bait were actually really good trade bait, which is nice. I had a lot of options looking at a story sale. I just tried to pick out things that I thought would be desirable to dealers. Then he also did pick out my 1998 Topps Chrome Refractor Peyton Manning in a PSA 9. Now, this is that example of a card that I had in my collection that I really didn't want to give up. However, I fully understood I was needing to bring cards to this show that I don't necessarily want to give up, but I can get back again. So this is an example of a card that's probably, again, a really nice rookie card for Peyton Manning, but it is in the pop 3-400 range for PSA 9. You can easily get one of those back. And for a dealer there, it's a card that's pretty well set in stone in value. They can throw it out in their showcase. Somebody's going to probably end up grabbing it. So I ended up working on a really nice trade here. Again, I gave up quite a bit of cash, but I still had a little bit left over after this. But most of my money here at this point was already spent by Wednesday. And I had just freaking added, again, a Bart Starr PSA 10, no sales ever, even raw that I can see with Card Ladder for this select gold set, the 2013. And then the Peyton Manning 2012 Prism Gold, which I never, ever, ever expected walking into this show and acquiring. Because again, like I mentioned, I just really assumed these kind of cards were going to be stickered twice what they were worth, which kind of was what I was finding for my select gold set. But when you find that good dealer like Chase here, I mean, man, he was super fair. And I think part of the reason he, again, priced it where he did was because of how he got it. And then also knowing the case was chipped. So it's kind of, the selling point on this card. So the big dilemma on this card, and where I'm going to be moving forward here, kind of step away from the show for a second. Again, we now have a BGS 9.5 Peyton Manning Prism Gold 2012. The case is chipped in two spots significantly. You can see it from the photo if you're here on YouTube. And I literally just got done crossing a BGS 9.5 2002 finest Peyton Manning out 25. So I snapped that one I had because I had a chip in the case, sent it to PSA, got a 10. I think I'm going to try the same here with this Manning. I don't know when it's going to be. Sometime the next year, probably. I'll probably enjoy it for a while, but I do want to get it crossed over. I think the options are you send it to BGS for a reholder, but there's really no upside there. You're just paying them to put the card back in the same holder. If I send it to BSA, and again, it's 9.5s everything except the 9 surface, which I'm actually happy about because that could be a smudge. There's a possibility if it's surface scratch, they can't really do too much about it. But if it's a smudge, it might just need to be wiped off the microfiber. So we'll see. Again, maybe I'll touch on that, what happens there. But just a side note, as I'm thinking through this after I acquired the card, is like, oh man, this is going to be fun after the show to figure out what to do with this one. I want to keep in the collection, and I don't necessarily even care if it gets a PSA 9, but I think I am going to cross this one over after having some luck again in the weeks prior before the show. And just a heads up, that was the first card of my Mount Rushmore. Again, we're going to kind of touch on that towards the end, but that was the first card of my Mount Rushmore of pickups at the show, is this 2012 Prism Gold Peyton Manning. Now, one thing about this that I do want to mention here is Chase did have an Aaron Rodgers in the case. Now, I think a mistake I made was assuming that if I added that to the trade, I wouldn't have enough to give up to make it worth it, right? I didn't have unlimited money at the show, so I couldn't really just buy it straight up. And I did come back later in the show, and that was gone by the time I got back. So it's the first example that I experienced at the show where even though you might think the card will be there when you get back, it was gone within a couple hours. So props to Chase for getting a great deal on that. But it's kind of on me for not having brought that into the trade because who knows, maybe you would have picked out another couple cards that really break this one up a little more. Now, at this point, after the Peyton Manning and Bart Starr trade, it was pretty close to show close. I met up with my dad and brother at this point. They were having fun, which was great because they're pretty new to cards, but they enjoy it and that sort of thing, but just wasn't sure what they would think of the whole show. We did head back to the hotel by the time show closed. And at night, I kind of did a reevaluation of what I had acquired, and it was just insane at this point. Again, we have 3 cards for the set I was really looking for, that select gold. We had 3 cards from 99 Finest that I really enjoyed with some upside here, again, because they had the peel. They were low grade, got really good deals on them. And then finally did get that 2012 Prism Gold Peyton Manning. So at this point, I was literally talking to my dad and brother. I'm like, all right, guys, I got no money left. That was a lot of fun. It was kind of crazy when the crowd started getting wild. Maybe I threw it out there at that point that maybe we considered leaving on Friday night instead of Saturday morning, because I was going to take them back home. They're from Florida. I was going to take them back to Wisconsin. And I was realizing already, like, holy crap, that was fun Wednesday. That was fun. I got a ton of cards I really wanted, met a lot of people that I wanted to, but I was exhausted, like super tired. I just didn't know if I had 4 days in me, to be honest. So by Thursday morning, I knew one of my goals was to sell some cards. I just wanted some cash so I can at least try to find something still while at the show. So I did line up a few deals prior to the show, or at least somewhat, which was nice. So I did sell a 2006 Topps Chrome Own the Game Refractor, numbered out of 100 for Tom Brady to Splendid Sports. Again, another example of card that was in my collection, but I knew I had to let stuff go if I was going to be picking up big cards at the show. Then also the 2004 Topps Chrome Black Refractor for Brian Urlacher. I sold to Chicago Bears cards. The example of a card that he had reached out on maybe months back when I had originally posted it, just said that he would be interested if I ever did look to move it. So when I looked through my collection, had that intimate moment, I said, I have to let some of these go. I think this is a good one, and I'll run into him. So it's a perfect card to bring to the show. And then something I did early in the show that I'm glad I did that morning. There was a booth called Hit Parade. If you're not familiar with them, I think they do repack products essentially, and they paid very strongly. So I brought my 15 cards that were left at that point. They picked out three that they really liked, and they paid pretty strongly on. I think it was like 85, 90% of value, at least what we had estimated, because again, most of these didn't have any recent sales at all. So the first one was the 2017 Elite Draft Picks, Aaron Rodgers autograph, just something I got in a trade at a card show, months prior. Then a 2006 Topps Finest Mickey Mantle Gold Refractor PSA 10 Pop 1, was able to sell that just from a recent grading reveal, something I had found raw. And then finally a Mark McGwire Super Refractor that I mentioned picking up prior to the show. So it's really sweet. I was able to, again, move some cards that I brought, which was another reinforcement that I really did decide on some good stuff to bring, which was smart on my part, I felt like. So now that I did have some cash, it was nice. I was able to walk the show, make some more pickups. I'm not going to dive into all the deals. It just gets to be too much. But now I did want to shift over just to my Mount Rushmore of overall pickups and share those with you. So the first card on my Mount Rushmore of show pickups was the Peyton Manning 2012 Prism Gold that I already told you about. So that one was amazing. We did pick up also a 2013 Panini Select Gold Prism Peyton Manning. So the set I'm hunting, my favorite player, probably I would say the second or third biggest card in the whole set. Did pick that up in a PSA 8. That was from Adam McNanny on Instagram. A card I'd kind of touched base on a couple months prior and throughout that I would be interested and probably pay pretty strong if he was looking to move it. We did make a deal happen. And what's really nice, again, I had exactly enough cash before I sold cards to pick this one up, because I didn't want to, again, not have enough money for him. But with the money from cards I sold, I was able to grab a 2006 Finest Tom Brady Blue Refractor PSA 10. So the example of a set I really, really love. I have now the black refractor in a 10, the blue X fractor in a 10, and the blue refractor in a 10. So pretty sweet. 3 cards of a set that I really love. Nice to pair these up with them. And the final card in the Mount Rushmore here is the Charles Woodson Topps Finest Gold Refractor that I already kind of mentioned. One thing that's crazy about this card, and I'll just put this out there, man, Charles Woodson collectors are insane. I think from looking at Card Ladder, this card had maybe 2 or 3 sales in the last 10 years between this one and the insert set that, again, I picked up both of his cards from this set during this show. It's just wild to me because, again, Peyton Manning or Randy Moss, some of these other guys, they have a lot more sales. So Woodson guys, I mean, they're crazy, but recently I was told this, and it's really good logic. What's different about Charles Woodson is you have Raiders fans, you have Packer fans, you have Heisman collectors, you have NFL Hall of Fame collectors. You also have Michigan fans, which are rabid. So I get why Charles Woodson never pops up to sale, but it's an example of why this one's on my Mount Rushmore. Just really did not expect a card like this to still be sitting there a few hours in the show. So kind of tying to that Peyton Manning Select Gold, I did just want to throw a picture for those on YouTube of all the Select Golds I was able to add at this show. Now, very proudly, I would say, I was able to pick up every single one that I found except for that Aaron Rodgers that I missed. So I added a Wes Welker from a pre-show deal. I met up with CS Snake 79 Chris on Instagram. I met up with him early on day 2 or day 1. I can't remember. Picked up the Wes Welker PSA 10. Again, the Bart Starr 10 you already know about. I did pick up a Bo Jackson PSA 10, which I was pretty excited about. I had been sent this card a few times at different shows. I think the dealer, who's a great dude, he's from Minnesota, but I really wanted to wait to make a play on one of these until I could get to a show where I could trade. So that's what happened here. I took out some cards and, an interesting learning here. So I had about 12 cards left by the end of the show here where I was doing this kind of last trade, really. What blew my mind is the cards I brought for modern guys like Trevor Lawrence. I select gold out of 10 for him, rookie card, and nobody wanted to grab it, which was very interesting to me because I assumed all these dealers would want them to sell them. But I think by the time Friday rolled around, a lot of these guys probably, I would assume, don't want to be picking up cards for prospects that they'd go home with. I would assume that's part of it. So I tried offering the Lawrence for the Bo, which I felt like was a pretty big overtrade, but he didn't have any interest. I ended up giving up like a Jalen Green downtown. These cards that I don't care anything about. I bought like 2 modern guys, and then I felt myself looking at them in my box the whole show, like God, just somebody take this card off my hands. So the Jalen Green did get traded. Again, I think a fairly significant overtrade on my part, which is kind of, I learned what has to happen on some of these cards that have no sales, and these dealers do really like the cards as well. So it's nice to make that trade happen and not have to give up cash, but give up a card that I didn't care anything about. So I'm back to the set. Like I already mentioned, we did pick up the Steve Young 10 and the Michael Irvin PSA 9. And what's really cool is I did get reached out to after the show on another card from this set. Now, as I was looking at what I had, again, I have the Peyton Manning already. I have the Travis Kelce from this set. A big guy that I really wanted still was Kelvin Johnson. Now, what's crazy is I had walked the show for 3 days, never spotted this card. But on Friday night, I got message from 2 different people who had seen it. So I was able to pick up the Kelvin Johnson raw copy. Shout out to Zanu23_sports cards on Instagram. He was able to negotiate for me, pick this one up, and he mailed it to me earlier this morning, which I'm just pumped about. Huge one to add, and a card where, like, Again, I mentioned this in other podcasts, but Kelvin Johnson's a guy where I would not want to try to bid this one at auction. I feel like it would be a bloodbath. So the fact that I could find a raw copy at what I felt like was a pretty fair price, if not a slight overpay, was really nice because who knows what some of these auctions would go for. So it's nice to kind of chip away at this set. And this does kind of reaffirm something that I had always questioned when I started wanting to go after this set. I was pretty unsure if I wanted to be outward about it, right? Like part of this is if I start talking about this set, I always worry others are going to start bidding on them or buying them. But I've actually noticed kind of the opposite. I haven't noticed any change in the set itself, but I've noticed a lot of people willing to help me complete the set, which is really, really nice. Because even when people have let go of cards they wouldn't let go of because it's going towards a set, which is kind of neat. Maybe a learning here that just I wanted to share because I think we are all run into that where you don't always want to share what you're going after because you think it's going to affect the market or maybe people are going to start competing with you. I found with this set it's actually been really helpful because majority of the cards shown here that I've just talked about the trades, the finds, the people reaching out to me would not have happened unless people were well aware that I was going for the full set. One of my favorite parts about the show, and again, a lot of people mention this, just I was able to meet a lot of people that, it's funny how you chat with them online. You're not sure how they're going to be in person or how you're going to get along. Everyone's personality felt pretty similar to what they are online, which is sweet. I made a lot of connections in person now, which is really awesome. I got together with my Peyton Manning group chat, spent some time hanging out with them Thursday night, which is really cool. And also, Kevin DeCaptain, he has a Tom Brady group chat. So they were all there as well. So it's kind of funny in this room of people who half of them like Peyton Manning, half of them like Tom Brady. I remember one thing the Brady guys threw on a Patriots game where they beat the Colts pretty bad in a big game earlier in the career of both players. That was pretty funny. But just a fun night meeting up with people. I did not partake in any trade nights per se. Just really wasn't feeling up to it after the show because I'll talk on this. My brother and dad, again, were at the show. I found out very quickly that my dad snores sometime the last 2 years between the time I last saw him. He snores. So sharing a room with him, man, I did not get much sleep, but it made for a fun experience almost because you're kind of tired. You're still trying to chat with people, be friendly. Probably some good practice for when you have kids one day. So one thing I wasn't sure of with going to the show with my dad and my brother, again, how much you'd really see each other. But it was fun where everyone could kind of have fun. You split off, you bump into each other still here and there. I remember the one day, I think it was Wednesday or probably Wednesday, I get a text and look at my Apple Watch while I'm, making a deal or something. It says, "Oh my gosh, Gary V's here." So I'm assuming my brother's messaging. And then next is a picture of Gary V. I'm like, oh, it's so typical. It's really funny. And then I get a text a little while later. It's like, look at this huge deal I made. It's exactly what you're not supposed to do. It's all the cards and the picture of all your money. And it's like just really, really funny to me. And then I check later, it was my dad messaging all those things. So that was just pretty funny. Like my dad was living the stereotypical like first time at a card show experience. So it was just awesome. By the time Friday rolled around, I really wasn't sure if they were going to keep having fun or not. So I kind of messed them after an hour or two. And they said they were still doing things. They found something fun to do. So I was like, okay, I'm not sure what that is. Then I met up with them towards the end of the show, and they had been buying these stickers from the VIP bags that were like Gary V's stickers. I can't remember the name of them. They're like the animal things. So they were buying them off of other people, taking them to Gary V, getting signed with the hopes of now selling, grading them and selling them on eBay. So they had so much fun doing that. And it's really funny. Like, I guess this is just the ridiculous, like, differences between how you can go about the show. Like, they had a ton of fun buying stuff, selling stuff, like trying to do more of the flipping, maybe that sort of thing. Like, again, I mentioned my dad with the photos and stuff is just really funny. Whereas I was just going after cards for my collection, but we still had so much fun. Like that's what I think really opened my mind at, this show in general. It's just really neat how there's tons of different ways to go about this. And again, we all had a fun experience, which is nice. To kind of wrap up here, I did want to share some overall learnings that I had. And this video, I really want to look back on it a year from now because these are my initial thoughts of what I just experienced. One thing that I really needed to do is do a better job of marking off the map and moving slower. I did not utilize the map at all that they gave. And the big deal and the problem I think I ran into was I was running around crazy for the first 2 hours, not really having any luck. And then I started just slowing down, actually looking in the showcases, and I had way more luck finding things. So I think that's kind of a tip for next year. Another thing is I really felt like, okay, I'd seen the whole show after the first day or two. By the time the third day rolled around, there was cards just constantly changing hands and moving around. And like that Kelvin Johnson I already mentioned, I didn't see it at all. And people found it Friday, Saturday that I was getting messages about it. So it's kind of crazy. You never really know what you're going to find. I think if you can't get there Wednesday, Thursday, you're probably still going to see new cards all the time. When it comes to when to go to the show again, I feel like for next year, I'm definitely going to do Wednesday, Thursday. It was a little bit lighter on crowds, especially in the morning. And I just had a lot more fun once the crowd started getting in there and it got really crazy. It got to be a lot and was a lot harder to look in showcases and kind of got a little overwhelming. Other thing is if you see it, grab it. Again, I touched back on that Aaron Rodgers Select Gold. Probably a mistake to not get it then. I think at the end of the day, it had to happen that way because just didn't have enough money to go after all these cards. But it's another point that, again, you might think the dealers like right about what they're worth. It's probably going to sit there a little higher than it's worth, but people will grab these cards. So I learned that quickly from this show. Another thing is to come ready before the show even starts. Like, I need to tell myself this so majorly because I did not expect all these things that were going to pop into my feed or DMs before the doors even open. Again, that 2012 Prism Gold, that sort of thing. I needed to be more prepared. I wasn't. I still stumbled into the card, which shows it was meant to be kind of, but that luck is not going to happen every time. And I feel like a lot of it was beginner's luck at this show. I'm going to be honest with you. I picked up a lot of cards, but I don't feel like I strategically went about getting them. I feel like a lot of people helped me. And next year, I really want to make sure that I'm the one who can go around doing that, finding my own cards, and of course taking help from others, but maybe being able to help others find cards as well. That'd be a big deal if I can kind of be more reciprocal next year, because I couldn't even find cards for myself, let alone finding cards for my friends on Instagram that weren't at the show. I really struggle with that. Just wasn't finding much. The other thing I learned is that the Instagram, YouTube FOMO happens even if you're at the show. By FOMO, I mean like fear of missing out. I think it's even more if you're at the show, right? Like last year, I didn't go to the National. I saw the Instagram stuff. I actually thought it was kind of neat seeing what was there, and I didn't, a little bit of feeling of, oh, I wish I was there, but it happens. I'll just go outside or do something at my house. But the fact is, if you're at the show and you're seeing cards online that you didn't see at the show and you didn't realize were there and someone else got them, I think that's even a more strong feeling. So the point of this bullet is if you can't make it to the show, don't feel so bad. I think the feelings of missing out are even worse if you're actually at the show, which sounds silly, but that's just what I experienced. The final real learning here, and I gotta say this to myself for the months to come, I really need to start thinking about trade baits and preparing months prior, because I absolutely loved the fact that you could trade for cards at this show. You could take a card that you maybe couldn't afford. Again, that 2012 Prism Gold, I don't think I would have gave up the money for that if I had to, but to be able to trade for it, half trade, half cash, such a big difference. I really enjoyed that side of things. And it kind of goes back to not just the trade bait, but lining up deals. That was a huge deal. Knowing in the back of my head I had cards coming, even if I didn't have luck at the tables, it made me relax a little more. And I think helped me find other cards easier because I was a little more relaxed, knowing I wouldn't be disappointed at the end of the day if I did leave the show with only the cards I had lined up. Overall, this show was literally just a blast. I learned so much. It really opened my eyes to what this hobby actually is. I feel like I was in such a silo prior to this of these people I collect the same cards, whatever. Then you go here and your mind is just blown. I mean, it's just totally different than what you expect. I really just can't wait for the next one. Just super excited. So thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed a little bit of a different episode, a little storytelling time with Austin. I hope it was a fun lesson, and I can't wait to see you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in.